From the Alvin and Rosalie Sarachek studio, PBS Kansas presents Kansas Week.
A Wichita state lawmaker is under investigation after allegations of concerning behavior. The Kansas legislature overrides the governor's veto of a bill that limits the grace period for counting mail-in ballots. But first, Wichita's mayor is facing an ethics investigation after refusing to sign a proclamation for Transgender Day of Visibility. We'll recap what happened and discuss the possible consequences on this edition of Kansas Week. Welcome to Kansas Week. I'm Jared Cerullo. We've got a lot to talk about this week. First off, Wichita Mayor Lily Wu says the local news media has misreported her not signing a proclamation for Transgender Day of Visibility this past week. In her briefing held on Thursday, Mayor Wu said the Wichita Eagle and 3 Wichita news stations all, quote, repeatedly misreported that she refused or declined to sign the proclamation recognizing Transgender Day of Visibility. March 18th, Cake's Nick Nelson has the latest on this ongoing controversy.
The newspaper and 3 television stations all repeatedly misreported that I either refused or declined to sign a proclamation. I'd like to ask each of them to cite their source.
That was Mayor Lily Wu at her weekly news conference Thursday morning, criticizing media outlets in Wichita for misreporting that she had not signed a proclamation designating March 31st as Transgender Day of Visibility. However, at the March 18th City Council meeting, Councilmember Maggie Ballard said this after presenting the proclamation.
And it appears this hasn't been signed, so I'm going to go ahead and sign it.
The mayor says while she did not vote for the proclamation, she did not ask for her signature to get removed, calling it a clerical error. Wu also said she was happy to proclaim June LGBTQ+ Pride Month and claimed that former Mayor Brandon Whipple's campaign team was behind the proclamation.
Transgender Day of Visibility has been around since 2009, and former Mayor Whipple, who was in office the last 4 years, did not issue this proclamation. Instead, for the first time, his campaign team requested a transgender proclamation for this month that segregated the T from LGBTQIA+.
We spoke with the former mayor about this growing controversy and Wu's claims regarding him and his campaign team.
The election's over, so I have no idea what she's digging into at this point. The mayor is responsible for the actions of the mayor. You don't blame your former opponent. Members of the LGBTQ community did support me during my race because they didn't believe that Lily was telling the truth when she said that she was in favor of the LGBTQ community, and sadly, they were proven right. Proclamations come from the community, and I didn't know about this proclamation until after it happened. I learned the same time everyone else learned what was going on.
Lots to talk about here. Here to discuss this and some of this week's other big stories is the publisher of the Cowley Courier-Traveler, David Seaton, Cake News anchor and reporter Pilar Pedraza, and KNSS radio host John Whitmer. So Pilar, I'll start with you, since you're kind of called on the carpet here, you know, one of those reporters. Cite your source.
Our source was the meeting and what was voiced during that meeting. We reported what happened in the meeting. We offered her a chance to share her version of what happened in the meeting. If she did not tell us this, then, you know, if there truly was a clerical error, that should have been something that she got out there right away and said something. You know, when Maggie Ballard said, oh, look, your signatures are on there, she could have raised her voice and said, oh, let me sign that. She did not. You know, those are things that kind of question mark exactly what she was saying. And I will say this, calling out the media for misreporting is an age-old device of primarily politicians.
Especially when she's a former reporter
and
herself.
She knows. In fact, the comment I made when that tweet came out was, well, that didn't take long.
Yeah.
It doesn't take long to move from the journalist category into the politician category when you suddenly find yourself in the heat of public
scrutiny.
Yeah. Yes, there's the word I'm looking for. Thank you.
John Whitmer, let me move over to you, chair of the Sedgwick County Republican Party. Is the mayor digging herself a deeper hole every time she talks about this?
Well, let me start with saying the mayor's not a Republican. She's a Libertarian, so it's not my job to defend her.
I think that might be debatable, though.
Well, she registered as a Libertarian. She's not a Republican.
True.
That being said, everything she said is factually accurate. The proclamation was submitted by Chris Pompelli, who was Brandon Whipple's campaign manager. That's factually accurate. The proclamation wasn't signed. They're typically signed by a Joe Biden auto pen. And it wasn't this time. That's a clerical error that was done by the city, so that's factually accurate. And this whole situation has been propped up. It's a non-story. The proclamation itself is clearly pandering. It's a virtue signal that's been put on by the left. It's a gotcha story. They tried to get her, and frankly, it's a non-story. And I think it's sad that they're trying to politicize this. If you want to choose the lifestyle, you want to be transgender, that's great. But why are we trying to make a big story out of nothing? And I think it clearly was designed to try and get her, to try and get a gotcha moment. They've succeeded. It's a non-story. It needs to go away. And there's nothing unethical about her actions.
Is blaming staff the way to go, though, when she clearly did not agree with
Sure, and she has a right not to agree. The First
But
Amendment,
why blame staff?
The First Amendment protects you from not only your right to speak, but credit where credit's due. Even Dion Leffler has said the First Amendment also protects you from compelled speech. She does not have to come out and say something that she doesn't want to say something. And I want to also point out the one openly gay member of the city council who also didn't sign the petition or didn't agree with the proclamation. Nobody's calling out Dalton Glasscock. Look, the bottom line is she doesn't have to agree with these, and we should respect her right to disagree.
She has a right to disagree, but she does not have a right, according to city code, to not sign it.
And she didn't.
As the
Again,
mayor,
it's an auto pen. And the
which
fact
is
that
why
it
I
wasn't
say,
included,
when
that was
it
a
came-
city error. That was a staff
and
error.
yet it's the only
She
time that
says.
error has happened.
Right. She said
And,
there were
when we reached out to the city to ask, can you clarify what the error was, how this happened, they referred us back to her. They would not tell us what the error was.
So we don't know how it happened. The
Exactly.
bottom line is, it's a he said, she said, and either way, they're facing a multi-million-dollar budget shortfall. This is the story. Why aren't we concerned about the fact that they've got to solve budget issues? Instead, they're trying to make ethical issues out of a non-issue.
Right, and I'll ask you about that in a second. But let me move on to David Seaton from Cowley County.
My thoughts on this?
Yeah, what is Cowley County thinking about what's going on up here
probably
in
not
Wichita?
much, but yeah, it's kind of interesting. It seems a little fishy, her explanation. You know, I don't know how many proclamations or resolutions she's signed as her time as mayor.
Lots. There's 5, 6 every meeting.
And so was this the only one that got missed, or have
Yes.
been others? So, and this is obviously a controversial issue. There's a lot of anti-trans legislation going out there from the the White House to the legislature. She probably doesn't want to be associated with it, so maybe this is a little conjecture on my part, but it seems like maybe she didn't want to be associated with it. She thought maybe she could get away with not signing it. It got exposed. She's blaming it on a clerical error. That's sort of how it comes off to me. If that was the case, why did she say that in the beginning when all this started, right?
Exactly.
So she appears defensive to me,
Yeah.
just from the outsider's viewpoint, yeah.
I want to make one point too, from our newsroom's position.
Absolutely.
Every newsroom is different, but from our newsroom's position, the decision to do the story in the first place was because we heard the accusation that she had violated city code with her signature not being on there. We looked at city code and it was very clear. We talked to several former city attorneys from various cities across the state and they agreed. It looks very clear to us that her signature has to be on there.
Yeah.
So whether it was a clerical error or she chose to not have her name on there, that was why we did the story. And she could have told us the first time we did that story.
That it was a Biden
that it
auto
was-
pen.
exactly.
And we still don't know if
that
she's
there was
going to
a
go back
mistake
and
made.
sign it, do we?
Right.
She did
Well,
say
she
that.
can't now. Maggie Ballard already signed it. And I do want to
Okay.
mention one thing. We did have Maggie Ballard booked for this show weeks ago. We also had Jenna Repass of the state Democratic Party booked for this show. Both backed out. I can't explain why they backed out, but it's really kind of depressing.
Perhaps they
Yeah.
don't want to stand up and defend their positions. I don't know. I can't explain
Yep.
or they either can't or won't defend their positions.
Yeah.
Well, I know when we tried to talk to Maggie for the original story, she declined to speak at that point, saying this really isn't about me. You know, I just signed it because it was there and it needed to be signed.
This is clearly an issue where they're trying to score political points. Let me also point out the photo that was taken with the 4 members who posed for this picture. If you look at the photo, Maggie Ballard is making a gesture with her hand holding the proclamation. Let's just say there's a middle finger involved. It's very obvious. I think this has been clearly designed as a gotcha moment. It worked, but we need to focus on what matters. This doesn't matter. That $4 million to $8 million budget shortfall, that's what's mattered, and no one's talking about it.
Yeah. It does seem like a distraction, but we'll move on now. Definitely a hot topic. Kansas lawmakers have pushed through a controversial election change, overriding Governor Laura Kelly's veto of a bill that could disqualify thousands of mail-in ballots. Senate Bill 4, it moves the deadline for counting advanced ballots to 7 p.m. on Election Day, eliminating the 3-day grace period that had been in place since 2018. Supporters say the measure strengthens the election integrity, while opponents warn it will only disenfranchise voters, especially senior citizens, students, and those in rural communities. The Senate voted 30-10 to override the veto, with the House following suit 84-41. The new law will take effect ahead of the 2026 election. John Whitmer, I'll start with you this time. Tell me, you're a former state lawmaker yourself. Tell me what you think about this.
You know, you got to pay your rent on time. You have to pay your mortgage on time. There's no reason why you shouldn't have to get your ballot in on time. Florida has been doing it for decades, and they have, millions of voters. I've always been frustrated, I'm sure you've covered election night, that we have to wait days to find out the results of our elections. I think this is a good move. I'm glad to see them finally do it. There's no reason why we have to wait days, sometimes weeks, to find out the results of our elections.
And kind of one of the questions I had is, when did it, we used to have election day. Mm-hmm. When did we go from election day to election month?
Yeah, there's no reason. I get the arguments, I understand it, but nowadays it's easy to get a free ID. It's not, there's no reason not to have this. And if you want to get your ballot in on time, just get it in on time.
Yeah. Pilar,
I would
go ahead.
argue that we went to election month, election weeks, beyond a month in 1774.
Okay.
It's only been in the last 50 to 60 years that we have been to the point where we truly knew the results pretty much on election night. And even then, it has always been the case that those provisional ballots were not counted until we got to the canvassing, which was usually about a week to 10 days later. So those elections were not finalized until a week to 10 days later.
Sometimes on the day the county commission canvasses the vote.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there have always been races where they were so tight that we had to wait for those provisional ballots at the canvassing board to be counted to find out exactly what the result is. I don't see that the timeline. We had a false sense for several decades, the 70s, 80s, 90s, of, we know who the winner is, because we were in this realm where networks had exit polling going on, and they would call the race, and so we thought, okay, the race has been called, it's done.
Everything was ready by the 10
but
p.m.
it
news.
wasn't.
Yeah,
it wasn't. It was a very false sense. We are now back to reality. Yeah. And whether or not you count those mail-in ballots for 3 days after, or only until 7 p.m. on election night, it's not going to change when we know the final results. The final results are still going to come that 7 to 10 days later when that Board of Canvass meets.
David Seaton, any comment here?
Yeah, I mean, this is all kind of done under the atmosphere of, election fraud and problems with mail-in balloting that really have not been proven. They're been discredited, really. I mean,
not all of them, some of them.
Well,
not all.
in Kansas, have we had any mail ballot fraud?
No,
I mean,
minor cases,
and the
but
reason,
nothing significant.
and the reason I think they did this in 2017 or 18 was because they want to make it. Seems like in this country we should make it easier rather than harder to vote. I mean, our participation levels are pretty pathetic, really, when you look at some other countries. So, and this is one thing that can help. Mail delivery is not great, right?
Right.
So I think part of the reasoning behind, but yes, and it's not getting any better. Part of the reason behind this, I think, was that, hey, you put your ballot in the mail, you're not sure when it's going to get delivered, so let's give people a grace period. I believe the County Clerks Association actually supports the grace period. Correct me if I'm wrong. I know our clerk does in Cali County. She has faith in it. She supports it. I think she sounded a little frustrated when I asked her about the change. So it seemed like it was a problem or a solution that was looking for a problem.
All right. A Wichita lawmaker is under investigation as state lawmakers review a complaint accusing him of creating a hostile work environment. The Select Investigative Committee is considering whether to censure, reprimand, or expel Representative Ford Carr after allegations of violent speech and past altercations. Evidence presented includes a controversial House floor speech from 2023 and a January confrontation at a Topeka pub involving a Wichita City councilman. The complaint, filed by Representative Leah Howell, alleges a pattern of concerning behavior. Carr objected to the hearing. He's arguing that the complaint was vague and delayed. The committee has yet to rule on the objection, and will hear testimony from both sides in the coming week, just before lawmakers adjourn for spring break.
And I did want to make a quick note.
Go ahead, Pilar.
That was the last day of the session when that second hearing was supposed to happen. It ended up getting canceled because one of the main members of that committee was actually carrying a bill on the floor at the time. It has not yet at this point been rescheduled. Whether it will be is a question mark.
It
is a select committee, so it can be.
For the 10th, when they go back, I
That's
believe.
when they go back for the veto session, so that will be held in the next week or so. John Whitmer, tell me your thoughts on Ford Carr. How does the Democrat Party, and again, we tried to have the state Democratic Party chairperson here, but unfortunately we don't. But how does, you're leading the Republican Party, how does a county or a state party deal with one of their own members in a situation like this?
I served in the legislature when we had to deal with one of these complaints that was filed against a Democrat at the time. This is a Democrat problem. We've had them in the past with Republican issues. Look, if you're asking my opinion, the Democrats should have censured him, expelled him when he assaulted Henry Helgerson. That was beyond the pale. The behavior was inappropriate. I'm not going to comment on whether criminal charges should have been filed. That's a legal issue. But behaviorally, appropriate behavior-wise, it clearly violated ethics, and he should have been expelled for that. But again, this is an issue that Brandon Woodard, the minority leader, should have dealt with. They should have, frankly, I think they should have expelled him for that. This is a problem that they have to deal with. Right now, this committee is made up of 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans. I guarantee you the Republicans will vote appropriately. It's how the Democrats will vote. If they don't, this will be a problem. It's been ongoing. He's been loud, obnoxious. He referred to another member, a Republican, African-American, as a house Negro. There have been all kinds of issues with him repeatedly in the time he's been in the legislature. If they don't solve it, it will just be another issue that will continue to come up.
Well, Pilar, Ford Carr has certainly given reporters lots to talk about over his term of service.
Yeah. I would say that as far as his behavior, I have 2 comments about that. One, the only thing that differentiates his behavior from behavior I have seen from other lawmakers, both Republican and Democrat, that have not had complaints filed against him, is that he made a couple of comments on the House floor.
You've seen a Republican assault another Republican at an after-hours event?
I said Republican and Democrat.
Again, have you seen a Republican physically assault?
I have been in fear of being assaulted by a Republican
There's
before.
a difference between being in fear of and actually
to me, there's not.
He assaulted Henry Helgerson,
shoved
him, Henry hit his head on the wall. You've seen that happen. I've never seen it happen.
I have been the recipient of it. It can
happen. Then that person should have been censured or expelled at the time, but it wasn't. This behavior
that video does not look good. That's for sure.
Right.
But
I'm not saying whether it should happen or shouldn't have happened. I'm saying it didn't happen and it has happened.
And it's unacceptable.
The only difference that I am seeing is a couple of comments that were made on the House floor, which can be argued both directions.
I agree.
So,
and it doesn't excuse the behavior.
2 things going on here. One, lawmakers need to get their act together and treat everybody the same and have the same set of rules for all lawmakers.
I agree.
Yeah, is it part of Carr's defense or and some others supporting him that he has been sort of unfairly not physically attacked but threatened in chambers on the House floor? So he's like, hey, if you're going to accuse me of these things, what about these guys' behavior? And just sort of backing up a little bit, big picture view, our politics is getting more and more vulgar.
Yes, it's bad.
Vulgar,
divisive,
maybe a good word.
Whatever word you want to
divisive.
use.
I mean, it sort of seems like it's the old House of Commons back in the 1600s or something. And the tone is being set at the federal level.
Yeah.
And
on both sides of the aisle.
we've got
Definitely.
both sides too, but we've also, we have a president that has broken all kinds of communicative norms, and it's sort of filtering through, I think,
But
down
you
to the
can't
state
just
level
single
and
out the
everything.
president. We just had a member of Congress refer to a Democrat governor in a wheelchair as Governor Hot Wheels. It's not just the president. It's both sides of the aisle, and both sides need to ratchet down the rhetoric.
Well,
I'll cut
but
you-
it
I'll cut you
starts
guys
from
off
the
there.
top, and Trump has completely sort of vulgarized our political atmosphere. I mean,
We'll
I
leave
don't
it
think
at
there's any doubt
I
about
do
that.
need to move on to our next story, though. Already 6 months behind schedule and tens of millions of dollars over budget, Wichita's new water treatment plant is facing yet another delay. Cake's Sydney Ferguson explains.
We're getting close to taking ownership of the plant.
Close, but not quite on schedule. The Wichita Waterworks plant was expected to reach final completion on April 1st after multiple delays in the past 6 months. But last week, Public Works and Utilities Director Gary Jansen updated council on more setbacks.
It was temporary issues associated with the testing.
Right now, the plant is in the process of testing the water to prove it can meet regulation standards.
There were some delays due to the extreme weather during the performance testing that were not a fault of Wichita Water Partners.
At a Tuesday morning workshop, Jansen projected the city will take ownership of the plant sometime in the next 30 days. He says once tested water passes inspections, the city will seek a permit to operate it and take over its operation.
We need time to be able to be comfortable with that, to make sure we can safely operate the plant.
Jansen says the drought has also impacted the ability to bring the water system online slowly. He says there isn't enough water to run both the new and old plant simultaneously before relying solely on the new one.
We're continuing to look at scenarios to develop a way to start to bring that new plant online as quick as we can. But I think it very well could be 90 to 120 days.
Despite the 3 to 4 month delay, Jansen says the goal is to have the new plant solely providing water to the distribution system by the fall.
That is our absolute focus. We're doing everything we can.
In Wichita, Sydney Ferguson, Cake News on your side.
And Pilar, I'll talk. We need to make this discussion quickly, but I'll start with you. Lots of complaints seem to be coming in about the city wasting water at going down the drainage ditch, the floodway, as they prepare for this. And now it's going to go on even more, unfortunately. This just doesn't look good.
And that's exactly what it is. It's mostly optics. The city really doesn't have a choice. If they want to bring this plant online, they have to test to make sure that it's working. And once they test, they can't reuse that water. You can't, they can't recycle it somehow.
It's going down the river.
It's got to go down to the river and move on. So they don't have much choice as far as that goes. This has been a project since day one that has been plagued with problems and controversies. And to a certain extent, one, it's bad optics, but also I think it's kind of inheriting some of that history that has been going on with that project since the beginning.
Yeah. All right, Wichita gets more money to fight homelessness. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development has awarded the city a $3.2 million grant to provide permanent housing solutions. Cake's Kate Devine has the details.
You know, sleeping outdoors is it's not a choice, and it's hard work.
Michael Kerrigan is working to help build houses in Wichita, but he's still one of hundreds of people living on the streets. He knows the struggles of finding a place to live.
I mean, that's a big order to tackle. You have a lot of homeless people here. There is programs in place now, but they take a little while to process through. Yeah, it's a great thing if it all comes together.
A $3.2 million grant from the Department of Housing and Urban Development will help people like Kerrigan.
This money goes to, like I said, permanent housing solutions, without which that's over 1,000 people that would be sleeping on the street.
For many in Wichita, finding a safe place to sleep is a daily struggle. The federal grant money will go straight to the United Way of the Plains, not only to help them find homes, but for rent assistance and getting basic documents like an ID.
Personally, I have my documents, but a lot of people don't, so you can't go to a job, you can't even rent a motel room without the proper documents, you know.
The grant will not only help them transition out of homelessness, but also work to prevent people from falling into it in the first place.
This also provides a solid exit strategy for folks, our guests at the MAC, as they go through the programming at the MAC and they work on their housing plan. What this will allow them to do is work with provider agencies to find safe, secure, stable housing.
Experts say this effort won't solve homelessness overnight, but it's a crucial step toward making the issue more manageable and ultimately less reoccurring.
And so while there, it may seem like the problem is getting greater and greater, that there are solutions.
And again, David Seaton, from a Cowley County standpoint, does Cowley County have to deal with homeless issues such as this?
Sure, it does.
Okay.
Yeah, homelessness is everywhere, including in rural counties or mid-sized counties, kind of like ours. And there's a coalition there that tries to help the homeless and do what they can. And they run into problems, a bit of NIMBYism and funding and how to help. It's really homelessness, of course, is a hard problem to crack.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was writing about it 20 plus years ago in Southern California all the time, and it seemed like there was another program coming through that maybe this will be the way. And I think some of the best programs that I'm aware of, they wrap services around, they get people in shelter, they wrap services around it. It's very intensive, but it's very costly. Yeah, so it's difficult to do, but that's what can provide some success. It sounds like this is moving toward that.
Yeah.
It's costly off the top when you start, but then once you get those programs rolling, they're actually very cost effective. That's why you have cities like San Antonio and Salt Lake City that continue those programs for years, and they've had great success with them, because in the long term, it's cheaper to deal with the situation that way than to deal with the nonstop issues that we're having in Wichita, from the crime to the public nuisance and the cleanups and all of that.
And John Whitmer, let me give you the last 30 seconds here. Pilar brings up a good point that a lot of people claim that it's cheaper to just give the homeless a house rather than to continue to fund all of these programs.
I think this is a better way to do it than to just give them a home. And I'm glad to see it's federal funds that frees up the local economy or local city units of government to put their money where it's better suited. So I'm glad to see federal funds going towards this.
All right. We are out of time for this week. So thank you so much to David Seaton, Pilar Pedraza, and John Whitmer for being here. I'm Jared Cerullo. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again next week.